Just sell the beer. Sell the beer, all right? But they can't just sell the beer. And that is inherently what is so wrong right now. They can't just sell the beer. And they can't just sell the beer because there's all these other forces at play. Forces, which, by the way, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president, he would tell you this. He came out with a book. I interviewed him when he first came out with the book. It was just tremendous. I had him on the show the other day again. And I had his co-founder at Strive on recently. He was a former executive at Anheuser-Busch. So he's watching this whole thing, train wreck unfold. He had some great things to say about that. You should check out the interview. Anston Frericks, who's over at Strive Asset Management. But what Vivek talked about was something called Woke Inc. In other words, they're laughing all the way to the bank. They're trying to recreate capitalism in kind of a socialist, communist style, a totalitarian style, where they make all the decisions. And by the way, they profit from all of these gains, right? They get to pick the company you're invested in. But as I started to say, while you're asking, well, what is ESG and why is this happening right now and what's really going on? Well, there's one asset manager in the world that's a really big deal. I mean, they control more than half the size of US GDP, and that would be BlackRock. And they made a commitment, a decision that they wanted to make sure that everybody had this certain kind of governance at a corporation. So instead of like just focusing on selling your product, you now have to focus on your ESG rating. Because if you don't have a good ESG rating, well, no one's going to be able to invest in your stock. Or so they think. I mean, I still think that the market has a funny way of working these things. That's why you want to be ahead of the ESG crowd. You want to actually be able to see through them with laser focus to know how wrong they are on lots of stuff. So they've got this whole sort of scheme going, and it's recently come under, just in the last year, a lot of fire, right? Because if you don't have a market that's going up, 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 if it gets more challenging, as we saw certainly on the S&P last year, and it's kind of dicey still this year, if you don't have just this up, up, and away momentum, suddenly people get a little bit picky. And suddenly investors, they care about earnings. Gosh, darn, earnings. And if your earnings aren't good, then you're not going to be able to attract more investors. And so some people have referred to it as a little bit of a Ponzi scheme. You got this big company calling all the shots. And it just trickles down everywhere else. And so people say, well, what can I do? How do I know if somehow this is affecting my portfolio? I can tell you it probably is affecting your portfolio. If you have a 401k, for example, unless you're out there buying your own individual stocks and picking your own individual stocks, most likely you have some element of ESG in your overall portfolio and in your savings. And it's hard to escape from. It's hard to get away from. But some states are being really proactive about it. I actually commend Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, for the actions that he has taken. And Kansas has also taken some action. Texas, some, but not to the extent of, say, Florida and Kansas. And I think ultimately you're going to have states all around the country say, listen, we want returns. Because you know what? Someday our employees, that taught in school or were policing our streets or fighting our fires, all of our employees need to retire. And if your ESG stuff is just one big house of cards, because nobody seemed to remember that companies actually need to earn money in order to continue attracting investment, that's kind of how it works, well then we're going to have a problem, right? Because then the states are going to be on the hook. How are you going to pay all those retiree benefits out? And then, even if you're not in a union or getting this pension fund or working for the state, you still probably want to make sure that you're going to be okay one day when you retire. You got enough of a complication with some of the long-term trajectory issues in terms of our economic fundamentals and the $31.4 trillion worth of debt that we have. By the way, Biden doesn't care about that. I didn't hear him talking about that at Howard. No, the unbelievable. None of these people have any substance. They just keep reverting to a really dangerous well of rhetoric that is not good. not good. Anyway, so we got bad long-term economic fundamentals. So yeah, if you want to retire someday, you want to make sure that your investments are actually going to produce, which means that the companies actually have to earn money, which means that this whole, let's value them because are they proper from a social standpoint, from a climate standpoint? Like none of that really matters when you're just trying to pay your bills. So we've had like a lot of nonsense in there, and I just think it's time to kind of square that away.